Hello, N4H&H here with the Yaesu FTdx10, and this video is in response to an inquiry from one of my Patreons. Patreons can ask questions and make suggestions for future videos. And so one of my Patreons, Michael, had inquired about setting this radio up for CW, particularly relating to the use of an Iambic paddle. So you see Iambic paddles here. This is the bencher, and this is the Kent. I use the bencher with the FTdx10. I use the Kent with the FTdx5000. This is just a dust cover from eBay. I like this Kent. It's bearing driven. It's a really fine paddle, but the bencher does a good job as well. Neither of them are super expensive. They're both under $170. And so, those are Iambic paddles, I-A-M-B-I-C. Really all they are fancy switches. Because inside of the radio is a keyer that handles all of, the speed, the creating the dits and dahs, the dots and dashes and things like that. So we'll get into that in a minute. I want to show you first of all how you wire an Iambic paddle up. So on the bottom side of the paddle, I connected this cable, and you've got the common, which in this case this cable has a shield, so I used it for common. And then you've got the dits and the dahs. Now, if you're left-handed, you could reverse that if you'd like, but the radio has a way to reverse it internally in the menu. So you've got three connections, all right? Dits, dahs, and a common. So let me show you how you wire that on the plug. Now, this is a 1/4 inch stereo plug. So it has three places to connect. Tip, ring, sleeve. And so the way that's wired is you've got connections here. Let me get up close here. So this connection here, which you can see is connected to that little, almost looks like a nail head sticking through, that will go all the way to the tip. So that's the connection where you want to solder the wire that's coming from the connection for the left paddle, for this paddle. All right, and then the next one in, which is right here, that's the ring. So that's this part right here where my thumb is, and that will be your dahs, your dashes. And then finally you've got this big part which is called the sleeve, and all this is together. And sometimes you would solder, say, a shield to that. But in this case it is a shield because I used a shielded cable to, not that I had to, but I just happened to have one. So that's how you wire it. And so I'm going to put this back together and plug it into the back side of the radio, and I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. We're plugged back into the FTdx10, and I want to go over with you some menu settings. I'm not going to get into every single one of them because, to be honest with you, a lot of them I do not touch. A lot of it you can read in the manual, but I will go over the ones that I do change. Page 14 covers how to wire the Iambic paddle so you can use it with this radio. And now I want to get into some menu selections that you make, and you make them by pressing the function button here. We'll go into the big menu there. Now I'm going to pan up to the big screen so it'll be easier for you to see. I'll use the mouse to navigate. Now you've got 5 settings here for CW that, think of it this way, you want these a little bit more at your fingertips, okay? But then there are some deeper settings that you'll usually just set once and forget, and I'm going to go into those now. And it's right here under CW settings, CW setting, right here on the lower left. Mode CW, AF treble gain, okay? So I like to allow the audio circuit of the radio, since this radio has this ability. Not every radio does. I'm going to have the audio circuit of this radio assist me with zeroing in on the frequency that I want to hear. We call that the side tone, okay? And let me back out 1 second and show you what I'm talking about. Right here, CW pitch, okay, 600 hertz. That's just what I like it to be. Now, if I want to change that, I can select it. And if you look up here on the top right, it tells you that what your function knob is currently set to be by default. So if I rotate the function knob, which I'm doing, I can set my side tone pitch. Okay, so that's what you hear when you're transmitting, but it's also what you hear when you're receiving someone, because remember with CW, they're not transmitting the tone. They're transmitting carrier waves in dits and das, short and long segments of carrier wave. On your end, you have something called a BFO, beat frequency oscillator, that is creating that side tone according to what you assign it to be. So back into the menu and back into CW settings. So just bear in mind, I want my side tone pitch to be 600 hertz. So I really don't need a lot of treble to hear 600 hertz. What I am doing is boosting mids a little bit, and then bass I left at default. Remember, if it's yellow, it's default. So you can see here things that I left at default. Now when we get to low cut frequency, you'll see that I did make a change. All right, so let's take a look and show you what did I change. You can go all the way down in frequency for your cut. You can do off, really, meaning it's going to allow all frequencies all the way down to the threshold of human hearing. But look, the default is 250, right? Well, I want my side tone to be 600 hertz. So really, I'm just saying, look, you know what? I could do 550, but I just decided, I don't want to hear anything less than 500 hertz, okay? And then I want to slope it off at 18 dB per octave. The default is the good way to go there. You have another choice, which is 6 dB per octave, but that's more of a gentle slope. What I'm saying is, if it's below 500 hertz, chop it off, block it out, don't want to hear it. Now, again, remember, my side tone is 600 hertz. We have a high cut. So what we're saying here is if the frequency is above 700, and again, you can see that's not a default, I changed it. If the frequency is above 700, chop it off, cut it off at 18 dB per octave. In other words, I want to carve out the area of 600 hertz, say somewhere along in here, and that's what I want to accentuate. That's what I want to hear mostly. So I've got, if you think about it, I've got a 100 hertz buffer on each side of 600 hertz, just in case somebody's a little off frequency up or down. So those are some of the settings two of the settings I changed. Again, you see here the rest are defaults. I want to mention this one here. Well, I should mention this one too. CW auto mode, you can enable that to where you could actually use your Morse paddle when you're in sideband mode. That one right there allows it to be used on 6 meters, 50 megahertz. And then there's just on, which you can use it anywhere. But again, I'm going to leave that to off. CW break-in type, I will mention this one because of the fact that there are a lot of you out there who like to operate what's called full break-in, QSK. That essentially means that in between every dit and die you send, your receiver comes back and you can hear in case somebody wants to butt in, But let me show you, I'm on a dummy load. Let me show you why I don't like that setting. You hear that relay chatter? There's a relay in there that's switching the radio between transmit and receive for CW mode. And I'm going to pan down a little bit to the radio so you can see up in this area right here where I'm pointing. Watch the light, the LED. So you see what I mean? When that red light's on, it's transmitting. When it's off, it's not. And there's a relay in there switching back and forth. Relays have a limited lifespan. So is it really that important for me to be able to hear someone if they want to butt in and interrupt while I'm sending, and then, have a relay prematurely fail and need to be replaced one day? It's not. So I'm going to run it on the default of semi break-in. And then just a couple of quick honorable mentions here. The CW wave shape, that is the rise and fall time of your carrier wave for CW. Take the default there. I just realized you were looking at the little screen, so let's get back to the big screen. I'm going to skip down to decode CW, and I just leave that on the default. Basically what that's saying is the decoder, this radio has the ability to decode what you're listening to on CW. Well, the decoder has the ability to, it'll focus in on whatever your side tone frequency is and decode it. Well, this is saying to even the decoder, I want your bandwidth to be 100 hertz. In other words, I want to keep the decoder, centered up, looking for 600 hertz within a 100 hertz bandwidth. So I would leave that alone. Now, keyer. Let me move this up to the top. The ones you care about here are when you're using Iambic paddles like the two I've just shown you here, you want to set that on electronic key B. There are other options in there, but again, the default is the better way to go. It does have options for those of you who like them. You can select to use a bug. There's bug. And you got these other types of electronic keys that have to do with how you can use the paddles to send certain sequences by, holding both paddles together and things like that. But I go with electronic key B. The key or dot dash, that's normal. You can switch it, like if you had a paddle where the tip and the ring got reversed, then what would happen would be that, let me show you an example of that. I'm just going to switch this temporarily to reverse, and let me pan back down to this paddle. So this is back over to the bencher there, right? So watch this. See how it's responding backwards? So my DAWs are on the left and my dits are on the right. So if you had a paddle that was just wired backwards, you could reverse it. I'm going to put it back to normal, so it's... If you're left-handed, reverse may be more comfortable for you. Okay, let me pan back up. Get you on the big screen. And we'll continue. So CW weight. Again, I would really encourage you to leave that alone. What it is, that setting decides how long your DAWs are versus your dits. And you typically want a 3-to-1 ratio. So this means that a DAW is 3 times longer than a dit. And again, you can go in there and nudge that up and down. I would leave it on 3. That's the best way to go. Now, these have to do with contesting. I'm not going to cover that in this video. Then here are, and I've covered this in a previous video, you have 5 memories that you can store CW messages in, and then you can just tap the screen, or if you happen to have one of the Yaesu controllers that you can plug into this radio, the FH2, this guy here, let me pan down. This guy here, the FH2 controller. If you happen to have one of those, you can use that, and you press buttons on there that correspond to those 5 memories there, and you can send the CW without having to touch your paddle. I've shot a video about that. Okay, so that's it for the setup in what I would call, the deeper menu. And so then let's get back to this. This is the important part, and this has caused confusion for some of my viewers, and I think that this led to the question from Michael. So you wire your paddles up, you get it all hooked up, and it's not working. You got to make sure you turn keyer on, okay? And then you've got this other one here. Now there's CW speed, that's how you set your speed. There's pitch, and there's something called break-in delay. We'll get to that in just a minute. Break-in on, let me just tell you what that is right quick, and then I'm going to demo this. That determines whether the keyer is actually keying the transmitter. So wait a minute, Doug, what do you mean? Okay, so right now the way it is, when I go to use my paddle, let me pan back down again and lighten that up. Watch. Only the left one's working, and it's just sending a straight tone. Essentially right now I'm set up for a straight key. If that was a straight key. So you have to turn the keyer on. So let me move back up there. So you have to turn the keyer on, or the Iambic paddle's not going to respond. Now listen. Now I'm not transmitting, which is great, right? What you're in there is, think of it as a practice mode right now. I can practice my CW sending, but I'm not transmitting. Well, what does it take to actually transmit? You have to turn break-in on. This is typical with all Yaesu radios. So just remember this. In order to transmit CW over the air, you need to have both of these turned on. And here we go. Look at the power. Look at the power meter in the top. Now, I want to mention, I normally keep this on SWR, but for this demonstration, I'm putting it on power so you can see it actually transmit. Now, if I go back into the menu and I turn break-in off, now look at the power meter. Again, I've only got the keyer on so I can practice CW. So break-in is required for you to actually transmit. Now, break-in delay. Let me mention what that is. Listen for the relay chatter. Did you hear the relay? Listen again. Hope you can hear that. The relay turns on, but doesn't turn off again until I finish sending. And that's because I've got a break-in delay set here. Now, watch the menu up here change from pitch to break-in delay. So now my function knob is adjusting that break-in delay. So let's take it down to 200 and listen. Now you can hear it releases a little bit quicker, but you notice if I'm not quick enough with my sending, so think about this, what would happen if I send at a slower speed? So I'm going to change that over to, let's say, 12 words per minute. Hear that relay turning off in between every letter? So you kind of have to adjust that according to how fast you're going to be sending. So let me go back in there and, well, I'm going to put my CW speed back up to 18. By the way, I read somewhere that 17 words per minute is preferred by some of the professional Morse operators, believe it or not. Okay, but I'm going to put it back at 18, and here we go. But you still hear it click if I leave a little space there. So I'm going to go back in there and set my break-in delay. Let's try something like 500. To hear the relay let go. So I was able to send my CQ twice before the relay relaxed. So in other words, I'm not chattering that relay, I'm not wearing it out, which could happen if I were, if I didn't have that delay set high enough. So now what does that mean? We're not in full break-in, we're in semi-break-in, and it means that I'm not wearing that relay out. Do you really need to be able to hear somebody in between your dits and dahs? I mean, some people would argue maybe yes in a contest, I don't know, but like I said, I think semi-break-in and don't wear your relays out. So 500 milliseconds is pretty good, sending at 18 words per minute. You might even think about nudging it up to 600 if you feel like you need to. So those are some of the main things that I wanted you to see. Now, here's the thing that people are wondering about sometimes when I hear from them. Am I going to have to set that every time I go to another frequency? Well, not really. What you want to do is, the radio has what's called band stacking, and let me pan back down to the radio again. And I shot a whole video on band stacking, so I'm only going to just glance over this, but I have not upgraded my firmware. So I'm still using firmware 01-04, which means that I can tap my band button here twice and move between the band stacks. What band stacking is you can have 3 frequency mode registers per band preset, and it'll just remember the last thing you did. So watch this. I'm going to change this right now. The frequency is on 14.282, and I'm going to just temporarily change it to 28. I'll just move it anywhere, 282.6. Now I'm going to double tap my band button. Now I'm on another band register within the band stack. There are 3 per band. And now I'm back where I began at 14.043.980. Now here we go again. I'm going to tap it, double tap it. And look, it's still on 282.6. It remembers every setting. What's this? I'm going to change the filter from 3K to 12K. Not a great idea on sideband, but I did it. Okay, so we'll cycle through the band stack and back, and look, it's still on 12K. So now let's go to CW again. Let's say I put my filter to 500. Okay, I remember that I have installed the 300 hertz optional roofing filter in this radio, and it really does help. I shot a video about that if you haven't seen it. Well, now watch. I'll step through the band stacking. There's a sideband, and back to CW. That's the way I do it. I always set 1 CW and 2 sidebands in my band stacking. All right, for each band. So let's move over to 40 meters and see. It's, by the way, it still came back at 500. Now let's move over to 40 meters. All right, and here we are on a 40 meter CW frequency. Watch, I'm going to switch it over to 500. Double tap. Here's a sideband. Double tap. There's another sideband. Double tap. I'm back at that CW register, it's called. And there it is at 500. So it remembers all those settings. It'll remember whether the attenuator was on or off, whether it was on IPO or AMP1 or AMP2. So really, and it remembers, you know, things like these settings here. So you don't have to remember to go set those things every time, okay? Just go through your band stacking and do it once per band, and you should be really never have to touch it again. One other thing too, if you program the memories, I'm going to go to memory mode. And if you watch my video on this, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to long press the step/MCH button so it's flashing, and that means my outer dial now can cycle through my memories. And so it will even remember all of this when you set it in memory. Look, the tuner came on that channel right there, so it remembered that tune was enabled. See right there on the screen. Let me pan back up, let you look at the big screen. So, see right here, it remembers that tune was on the last time that I was on that channel. So these are the 60 meter channels which come pre-programmed, but changes that I make in these 60 meter channels will be remembered as well. Let me go to the CW portion. See, it's set on 300 hertz. I'm going to move it to 500, and I'll move over to the next channel. It's 300. If I go back now, it's on 500. So it's a really cool thing about not only the memory mode, but also the band stacking features of this radio, that it will just, it'll remember those settings. So I'm going to go back out of, I'm going to press V/M, and I'm back into VFO mode and not in memory mode anymore. And so, and here we are back to 300 hertz. Now let's go back to the 20 meter band like I did before. And press the wrong button. There we go, 20 meters. And there we are still at 500, right? So I'm going to switch that back to 300. Cycle through the band stack. And it's still on 300. So those of you who upgraded to newer firmware, you don't do the double tap anymore with the band button to cycle through the different band stack registers. I believe what I read was that you will be using the function knob to cycle through them. But either way, you know now that those settings you make will be sticky, as we say in the software industry, sticky. And again, if you decide, hey, I want to practice, I don't want to be transmitting, just turn break-in off and you can code practice. Turn it back on when you're ready to transmit. This one I would just leave on all the time. And I want to mention one other thing related to CW, and that is the DNF over here. That's your automatic notch filter. You don't really want to turn that on for CW, okay? So now back to my band stacking. If I go to USB, now I might want to leave it on. See, it's on for USB. In other words, in case somebody starts tuning on the band, it'll just automatically find the frequency there, you know, that's being created, that heterodyne, that tone, and it'll knock it out. But you don't want to do that on CW because that tone is what you're listening for. So even that, look, is remembered. It's the notch filter is off in CW mode. You could force it on, but I wouldn't advise that. Okay, so I went through that quickly. I'm trying to keep the video from being too long. Just remember, get your paddle wired, plug it in, and the main thing to remember is to go in here and turn on keyer and break-in, or it won't work. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. And I want to thank my Patreons for helping me keep this channel going. You're so valuable. I could not justify my time to do this without your support. And, you know, so for those of you who like this type of content, I welcome you to please also consider becoming a Patreon supporter. It's just a monthly support, $5, $10, or $20, and you help me keep the channel going. This is a type of Elmering channel, so you would also be helping in that endeavor, so we can bring more content like this to other folks. Just trying to help everyone get the most out of whatever radio they're using with operating techniques and tips. And so we do appreciate any of you who participate in the Patreon program. And don't forget, we moved the drawing to after the 1st of July. We're having a drawing, and the winner and I will spend an hour on Zoom talking ham radio, whatever, hanging out, because of the fact that Patreon bills on the 1st of the month. So if you had become a Patreon in the month of June and we did the drawing on June 30th, you would not be involved because they won't bill until the following month. So we've moved that, so everyone has the entire month of June now to come on board as a Patreon and get entered into that drawing. So if you would, want to join as a Patreon, go to patreon.com/N4HNH. I'll put that on the screen here. Again, patreon.com/N4HNH. And if you would, please like the video and subscribe. That doesn't cost you anything, and that helps the channel as well. And of course, if you do subscribe, don't forget, click the bell and you'll be notified when I upload the next video. Okay, so hey, thanks for watching, and 73 from N4HNH.